Welcome to Fright Night 2. Well, actually, welcome to Geek Legion of Doom and our review of Fright Night Part 2. So this is the horror movie review, in case you haven't guessed. So, Fright Night Part 2 is obviously a direct sequel to the original, and a lot of critics say it's a lesser sequel. And I'll touch on that again in a little bit. But basically, if you remember the end of the Fright Night 1, you had Evil Ed's eyes showing up briefly in the opposite house. And originally that was going to be the premise for the sequel. But for reasons unknown, possibly to do with Stephen Jeffries' later career choices, that was changed. So what you have here is you have a reuniting of some of the cast. You have Charley Brewster back, and you have Peter Vincent back, played of course by Roddy McDowall. And the story starts off with Charley sort of basically going to a psychologist, which you probably would do, to be fair, if you were the victim of vampire assault and everything. And they kind of like convinced him that he was part of some sort of, or he was kind of imagining the vampire side of things. There was like a, Jerry Dangerous was, they sort of say was a serial killer or whatever. But the actual vampire trappings, he's kind of convinced himself that was all his sort of a figment of his imagination, and he's near enough there, not quite, he's not quite 100% believing it, but he's pretty much there. Now Charlie's actually got a new girlfriend in this one. We're not really told what happened to Amy from the last film, but again, I'm guessing that they couldn't get the actress back for whatever reason, they just didn't want to. But the difference here is you have a vampire specifically seeking out both Charley and Peter, and that vampire is Jerry Dangerous' sister, Regine. And she's played by, I think her name is Julie Carmen, I believe. So she's coming into town with a little bit of a bit of posse of monsters to try and first of all mess with Charley, and then ultimately get her revenge. So I quite like that idea that it's not just. Some people may say Fright Night 2 is just a kind of it's the same film kind of just redone, and I can understand why people have that criticism, but the motivations are different here. So in the first film, Charley happened to sort of stumble across Jerry Dangerous the vampire. Here they're specifically seeking them out, and to me that makes it kind of a point of difference to me. So it's you have you have Carmen the Electra. You have the female vampire. Forget Carmen Electra. I don't know why I said that. A little bit of a snafu there. Regine, I mean. You have the female vampire sort of move into the same building where Peter Vincent's staying, and Charley sort of keeps thinking he's sort of seeing things, but he's not 100% sure. And basically, it's her sort of way of bringing him back and kind of messing with him a little bit. And I quite like that, and I quite like the sort of the scenes. And eventually, she sort of seduces one of his friends, and Charley basically sort of follows her up to, well, he's standing outside their building, sort of spying in, which is actually the funniest scene of the movie, where he's kind of he's standing on top of this like gargoyle with boobs, and these people just sort of walk past, look at him, and he's got his hand on the boobs, and just the way he reacts, I think, is absolutely comedy genius personally. But there you go. That's just a very small moment, and he actually sees her kind of bite his friend and sort of turn him into a vampire ultimately. So he gathers Peter Vincent up, who's as fond. He's kind of like wallowing in the memories that he's actually a vampire killer now. Of course, his girlfriend basically doesn't believe him, or just thinks he's had some sort of like psychotic break in his past or what have you. But he ropes Peter into going to this this sort of vampire's apartment, and she has this like unfeasibly big apartment, which is quite amusing. It looks like a hall in there. and they're having a Halloween party, and one of the best scenes of the film, we see sort of Regine do this sort of a very like seductive dance, and it uses the same music that we had in the first film, and it kind of puts Charlie in a trance. But again, she's just messing with him, and she's sort of like she's pretending that she's a vampire. It's like a kind of like a stage thing, but we know she really is a vampire. So basically, she's kind of like messing with Charlie's sort of, with his psyche here. But Peter Vincent actually then starts to believe that she actually really is a vampire. And then it's a case of, obviously, the roles are reversed, and Peter Vincent's now got to sort of basically pull Charlie back in to try and get him to believe that the vampires are real, whilst the tables are turned from the last film. And basically, Regine's plan is ultimately to sort of make Charlie into a vampire, so she can essentially sort of torture him forever. Ultimately, and this is the sort of the price of that has to be paid for sort of killing Joe Dandridge in the end of the last film. So eventually, his girlfriend sort of ends up believing after she sort of sees one, after she's attacked by one, and it's up to Peter and his girlfriend to the rescue. So it really Charley Brewster isn't really the hero of this film, to be honest with you. He's actually part more of the victim for a lot of the film, and that's basically the film in the nutshell. So a lot of people don't like this film. They feel it's just a kind of virtually the same film remade. I can have respect if you disagree. I'll go as far to say I like this film as much as the original film. So I'm a bit controversial on that one. There are some elements where I think the first film is better. I think Joey Dandridge was a better vampire than Regine. Although I do like her. I think she is, she's a very seductress, a very good seductress, and she kind of like plays her part well. But while maybe she's not quite as strong as Joey Dandridge, what she has in her favour, she's got like a posse of other vampires who I think are all interesting characters. So you've got one who is who when I initially thought it was another female vampire, but apparently it's not. It's a bloke, and he's this one that's kind of like this Michael Jackson thing going on with this big, massive hair, and he sort of skates around on roller skates. Never actually says anything, that one, but looks kind of very effeminate. Hence why I thought it was actually a female vampire. First of all, I was young. What can I say? Then you've got a kind of almost a werewolf type vampire. I'm not sure if he's actually a vampire or actually just a werewolf or kind of something in between. I mean, they kind of blur the lines in this franchise a little bit, as they did with Joe Dandridge's mate in the first film. So, and he's basically what I quite liked about here. He goes off his mission a little bit because he's ultimately sent to sort of deal with Charley Brewster's girlfriend, but he actually takes a bit of a fancy to her instead of just trying to sort of like turn her into a vampire, kill her, whatever. He just wants to flirt with her and actually sleep with her. So I quite like that kind of that little point of the story. And then finally, you've got a character called Boswell, who definitely isn't a vampire. He walks around during the day, but we don't know what he is. Ultimately, we think he's human initially, but at the end of it, he kind of basically turned into a big bunch of maggots. So we don't know what he is, but there you go, some kind of larvae monster, I guess. So because you have this kind of like, colourful cast of characters, and there's some great scenes really that have nothing to do with the actual plot, just where you've got these sort of three supporting vampires just messing around in a bowling alley, and it's just, I just liked it. I just thought it was a great little touch, a little bit of like dark humour there, and a little bit of character building for the kind of bad guys, which I don't think you see sometimes in horror films, especially the kind of the bad guys are just kind of left as this sort of like, remorseless killer. You don't really see anything like their personalities, but in this one you do, and I quite like that. So I don't think, as I say, Regine is quite strong, and certainly her kind of like final confrontation is not as gripping as the Joey Dandridge one. But I think the film as a whole stands up pretty well. And I'm hard pushed. If someone was to say to me which one of these films do I like better than the other, I honestly don't know. Peter Vincent is in this film a little bit earlier than the last film, so as much Roddy McDowall as possible. And I think, I absolutely adore his character. I think he's great. He's Charley Brewster's girlfriend. I forget her name, to be honest with you. I think that the actress's name is it's Alex. That's it. Her character's name is Alex, and she's a bit more proactive, a bit more kind of spunky than sort of Amy from the last film. I would have liked them to address why Amy, what happened to her. Because obviously, you think if you have survived the vampire experience, you're going to be fairly, pretty bonded in that. So I would have liked them to have addressed that. I guess that would be a complaint, and they kind of don't. Apparently, they did make a comic series after this as well that actually kind of follows the Evil Ed's character. I haven't read them, so I couldn't tell you exactly what they're about. But as far as I know, they kind of like spin off on what happened to him and stuff like that. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I honestly can't say which Fright Night I prefer. I actually really love them both. So, like Fright Night 1, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10 as well. I'll be really interested to hear if anyone else likes Fright Night 2 either equally or even more so than the original. Leave me a comment and I look forward to seeing you next time. See you later.